The AEC industry is rapidly changing, but your team doesn't have time to reinvent workflows for every new technology or client demand. ProjectWise, powered by iTwin, puts you in control and positions your firm for non-disruptive change. Whether you need to improve design quality, optimize existing processes, or even get started with digital delivery and digital twins, ProjectWise enables you to make the most of what you already have without starting over. Visit go.bentley.com/podcast to see how ProjectWise is empowering AEC firms to do more with less. Once again, that's go.bentley.com/podcast to learn more. Welcome to Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. And today we are joined by Mike Carragher. He is the president and CEO of VHB. He also serves as the incoming chair of the ACEC Research Institute. And today we're going to be speaking to Mike about a very important process that all engineering firms really should take advantage of, and that is strategic planning, which is more complicated than you think, and is really as long or short or in-depth or not of a process as kind of the firm or the choice of the leadership to really go into. So, Mike, thank you for joining us on a very interesting and wide-ranging topic here.
No, great to be with you, Jeff. Really appreciate the podcast and the opportunity to kind of talk to you about strategic planning today. It's been really important to VHB's, kind of history and evolution, and it's kind of what excites our team and our team members about where we're heading in the future.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think every organization can benefit from, no matter how long the organization's been around. A firm could be around for 100 years, and strategic planning keeps everything fresh, keeps everything kind of moving forward. How, from a leadership position at VHB, I mean, what's your perspective on strategic planning, and how important is it in your planning process, kind of in your planning for VHB's business over time?
I think our business is so action oriented, day to day, working with clients, working on projects, breaking projects down into tasks and subtasks. So there's so much day-to-day activity that, in order to allow your team to understand where you're going, you periodically need to, pull your head up, look out to the horizon, ensure that you and your team all have, kind of a vision of where you're trying to go. And then strategic planning gives you opportunities to kind of think in multi-year segments of how to make some qualitative and quantitative advancements, towards that ultimate vision that you and your team are striving for. That's how it's always been for VHB. I mean, our people love the work, love the projects, love solving problems for our clients, and kind of helping our communities as we execute these projects. But in order to get, for us, it's almost, we're heading up close to 2,000 people. And it's important that we're all heading in the same direction. You can do incredible things when you have your team in alignment. And that's first, where are you looking to try to take the company? And then every few years, okay, what big steps are we going to take over the next 3, 4, 5 years? And you can go back over the last 25 years, almost 30 years now at VHB, and you can, I was looking back through our strategic plans as we're getting ready to enter into our next one. And you see these advancements that we then, kind of create a new platform, and then we build from there and build from there and build from there. And it's more about kind of furthering your advancement. If you think of your company's timeline as a long arc of success, so it gives you the opportunity to identify a few areas you want to make some big strategic moves forward on, and it allows your team members to be part of the process and the conversation, and then it gives you a language going forward so your team can, when they're confronted with something in front of them, they can put it in the context of, oh, is this something I should spend some time on, or we should invest some money on? Oh, it's in line with what we strategically lay out as kind of our 3 or 4 big imperatives. So yes. And if it's outside those things, it allows you to at least stop and say, all right, let me check with a few people before I kind of go down this path, or is that going to slow us down or take us away from the opportunity to move in the direction we'd all talked about moving forward on?
It's a really important tool for clarity, I think, to that point.
It is. It really is.
You know exactly what to go after, what not to go after, because you have this guiding document that kind of helps you with the roadmap. And when resources are always scarce, and you're always trying to figure out how are you going to properly allocate these resources, and especially in times of economic uncertainty or a business cycle that might change, having that defining document allows you to navigate the storm a little bit easier, because you can kind of buckle down and focus on the core strategic objectives for the business. I like what you said about looking back as well, because I think a lot of people treat a strategic plan as a forward-looking document, and whenever you have a new plan, it's always moving the ball downfield. But doing multiple plans gives you that historical ability to go back and look at different past strategic initiatives. How in your experience, how beneficial has that been to kind of look back and see how the past informs the future?
It gives our people the opportunity to kind of, see that we're successively building on successes. So it helps you grow your confidence in the value of your strategic plan. If your team looks back and says, wow, the whole idea for VHB in the mid-90s of how do we come together, while we have transportation and environmental and land development and urban planning, but how do we put them together to really think in an integrated way to deliver integrated services, to think about, where would we grow? And this idea for us, it was always around kind of connected growth, not let's spread out all over the country, but let's think about where we are, and then think about geographies that are close, and recognize who VHB is, and then take a strategic step there. And over time, that was a great platform in the late 90s for us. And as they grew, to start saying, okay, these integrated skills and these strong skill sets, how would we then share that expertise across multiple offices? So that started to build. You kind of take 5 years forward, then we started saying, wow, okay, how could we really create some regional prominence around groups of offices in different areas of the country, and focus our concentration of efforts there? And again, fighting that urge to, well, we can open an office. I know somebody in Minnesota, we could open one there. Or we could open one. There seems like there's a lot of work in the Southwest. Let's go open an office there. Saying, no, let's think about how do we become not just good players in a geographic area that we're in, but how do we build really deep roots, and how do we grow to a level of prominence so we're thought of as, kind of one of the 2 or 3 top players in each market? So that was a big bit of discipline that we kind of grew in kind of 2000 to 2005. And then we started realizing that as we were growing, in order to continue this prominence growth and kind of recognize the benefits of all the strengths and expertise we had throughout the company, this idea for us about, all right, we really needed to move to more of a matrix organization, and so we could focus on 6 specific markets. We're in transportation, real estate, institutions, which for us is kind of college, universities, hospitals, federal government, local municipal government, and the energy market. So how could we connect that expertise across all of those markets, understand all the services that we have, and make sure you can tap into the best people for the best service line across our footprint. And so, we spent a few years kind of focusing on how to gain that discipline to think about things in more of a matrix organization. Then you kind of move into the last decade, and we really started concentrating on, all right, well, if we're going to be in a city on the East Coast, let's make sure we have strength in kind of the real major metropolitan areas of the three eastern mega regions. That's where the majority of activity is happening. It's where you have business, you have strong kind of local, county, state governments, you have colleges, hospitals, universities, all kind of creating these dynamic environments. And that's where we found our services to be of most value, where you were looking at really complex projects, and our people had the ability, and we had learned this discipline over 20 some years, of how to integrate that expertise to solve the most challenging problems in kind of the major metropolitan areas, and then in the areas that are urbanizing around them as you went out. And how do you deal with the mobility between the cities and the eastern mega regions? And it gave our people kind of that, like I said, that framework and that context of how to think about, okay, where should we invest? What should we invest in? How do I tap into the right expertise? And, now we're sitting here, and, one of the elements that came out of the last strategic plan, we had always been really strong internal technology tools. We wanted to kind of turn more externally thinking about technology. And so those early days of strategic steps that we took in 15, 16, 17 are paying off for us now as we think of offering our clients kind of data-informed, technology-empowered services at the right time. And we're able to capitalize on kind of the burgeoning AI opportunities and embrace them now, because we've built them in as part of our strategy, not just oh, wow, that looks really cool, let's try that. So it gives our people that ability to kind of navigate, and that looking back and seeing how we've successively built the strategy of the company over time gives people confidence of what we can accomplish going forward with an investment in the discussion and the thoughtful development of strategic advancements going forward.
I think that's a really, you covered a couple of different areas that I think I want to touch upon. The first is, that idea of growth and using a strategic plan to help you figure out exactly what the best path to growth is and what the best growth curve could be. And you do always go into those circumstances where you're like, okay, well, we do have somebody who is maybe they're a business line leader and they know some people in a different city and there's opportunity there, but is it really in line with the overall strategic direction of the company? And you have to kind of sit and actually really look at that. And then you have also these technologies that are disrupt. I don't really, after talking to some people who are engaged with AI and machine learning, I don't really want to call them disruptive technologies. They're opportunities for firms.
Yeah, it's the next evolution for a great opportunity.
So, I mean, do you do your planning internally, or do you bring in sometimes a third party who's a little bit more neutral and helps you kind of take out the personalities or take out the kind of personal histories and really allow you to focus in on specific objectives kind of with a little bit of neutrality?
With the history, like you said, almost kind of 30 years now of strategic planning, we feel comfortable with the process, but we've found that having a third-party facilitator, to challenge some of our groupthink is really important. And so, they can sometimes ask deeper, more probing questions in an innocent way that one of us might be hesitant to challenge each other on, because you know of the 10 years backstory on a topic that might get in your way of making a strategic decision going forward. And that third-party facilitator can be really helpful in keeping you on schedule, keeping you on task, asking challenging questions, and maybe hearing different things than you and your firm leaders might be anticipating what someone might say, where that third party is actually really listening about what they say, and you can pick out some nuances. We've found that to be really helpful with us in refining our process, keeping us on track and asking those challenging questions.
Yeah, we in my former life, at a PR firm, we did this from a communications angle, and we would be brought in and kind of during a strategic planning process, and we kind of handle a communications aspect from it. And I always, it was always that environment where you're coming in and there's a bit of, you're not as consumed with the issue as the people around the room. You're kind of new into it. You come in, you don't have the biases or the baggage or the history, and you're able to ask some questions that otherwise wouldn't have been asked, or make some challenges that otherwise would not go well in the room if it were just the internal leadership and people within the team. Do you have a set internal planning committee? Do you have a group of people that come together on a regular basis, or is it kind of rotational depending on exactly what you're looking to accomplish and how long the last strategic plan was? How do you approach it from kind of the nuts and bolts process to start?
So we've been using 5-year horizons to think about this, because again, in our industry, it takes some time to kind of, from a change management standpoint, or to kind of move and develop a reputation, maybe in a new line of work. And 2.5 years out, we'll do okay, let's stop, let's check. Do we need to make any adjustments for the second half of that 5-year horizon? But so at the 5-year point and at the midpoints, we usually gather a cross section of kind of leaders of the company, but then stepping into the organization at multiple levels, at looking for people who have that ability to kind of think strategically. I mean, it's not inherent in everyone. I think it can be encouraged and brought out, but we try to keep it fresh, and we're always trying to, we're very much focused as a generational company of preparing the company for the next generation. So we're always bringing multiple generations onto that strategic planning committee, one for their new ideas, but also as a learning opportunity for them in their professional and leadership development path to be involved in those discussions and see and connect historically how we've done it, be involved in executing one, because 5-10 years down the road, they could be sitting in my seat kind of leading the whole program for the company. And we want to prepare people. That's how I learned it, being involved for, kind of 15 years, 10 to 15 years prior to coming into my role as CEO, being involved in strategic planning committees and seeing how it worked and what didn't. And, kind of the issues to address, the data to collect, the outreach that's necessary, the openness that's necessary to move those things forward. So that's how we do it.
And I imagine that there's a good amount of stakeholder engagement that has to be done with the rank and file, where you might have this group that comes together, but how do you go about making sure that everyone's kind of enrolled in the process, right? That everybody has, even if they're not in the room, that they feel they're being brought along with the group in the creation of the plan.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 different tracks of examples that we did. In 2015, I had just been asked to be the CEO, and I had, the company was looking for, where's that next arc of vision? It was time to rethink and set that 15, 20-year vision out there on the horizon. And so I had come to the board and the leadership team with a vision that I said, this is where I'm thinking, this is where I'd like to take the company. I think this is what we have the ability to achieve, but I need more input. So after talking to the board and the executive committee and kind of getting their input, I then said, okay, I'm going to go on the road. And I do a town meeting, and VHB presidents have for a long, long time, a town meeting in every office. We're 30 plus offices now, and it's still one of those kind of important touchstones for VHB, to have a day, the president sitting there, different breakout groups, one whole office conversation. But what I did that year in 15 was share the draft of the vision and gave everybody a chance to say, does this make sense to you? What are we missing? What would you like to see more of? Is there a trend maybe that we haven't touched on? And that, kind of 3 months where I had those conversations in 30 plus offices, it added some richness and it added some specifics into that vision, in which we then really, at that time, it was about 1,400 of us, everybody felt invested because it was their vision. And then we went about setting the strategy. And then you go into another round of engaging people on strategy. And so this year, as we're kicking things off, we've done a number of things. We have our outside facilitator interviewing a cross section of clients, interviewing our whole leadership team, the board, doing sit down interviews, key leaders in the company, key rising leaders, and then we have an online survey for one kind of geared to the 25% of VHBers who own the company. We're owned by about 25% of our key employees. Another one geared to, kind of the people under 35 in the company to say, what are they looking to be part of for the next 15, 20 years? So different sets of questions. So we give a lot of opportunity for people to weigh in. And then this year on the town meetings, I'll be kind of giving them an update of how we're progressing on the strategic planning process and engage them in a kind of a focused topic depending on where we are in the process. So this is really an opportunity for everybody in our company to be involved, to see it happening, to have the opportunity to share their perspective, and in the end come out with something that says this really is our strategic plan and gives the people the ability to kind of self-navigate going forward.
So, Mike, those are really good points, especially when it comes to people who are looking at how do we keep everybody together during the process. Now, once you get to the point of having a plan, the question then becomes how do we operationalize this plan, and how do we actually act so that we can, hit the metrics that we set. Metrics are a whole separate conversation. Let's go there first. Actually, when you set metrics to measure against the plan, what is the process of kind of looking at setting those metrics? Do you look at past performance? Do you look at what indicators? Is it a mix between qualitative and quantitative? Is there, or what is your approach?
So, particularly for an engineer, I'm a less metrics, more qualitative person. A lot of engineers go to a hard series of metrics. I'm most, and our company is very focused on qualitatively moving forward. And we've learned over time, if you look at some of the early strategic plans of VHB, there would be a financial metric embedded in that's our strategy, or how do we get to this scale? And now we kind of say, well, look, if we identify the right strategic imperatives and we identify the right series of actions to move forward, then we would anticipate over a 5-year horizon of a strategic plan to have these financial outcomes. And we'll list 2 or 3 metrics. It might be kind of on average, net revenue growth, advancement of a profitability number. It could be, a growth in corresponding backlog. But again, we'll use them as, if we do this strategy right, we need to move to those directions and see those outcomes, or we would anticipate those outcomes. And we do that because people are more engaged in helping move something forward, to be part of advancing growing prominence, advancing a new market. And we the leadership team of the company kind of make sure that each year we're balancing the investments and the performance in a way that we can afford to invest in our people, invest in the elements that are necessary to advance the strategic plan, and over time move those major financial outcomes in the direction that they go. But we try not to use the financial metrics as the driver, but there's a responsibility of being financially responsible each year and advancing the strategic initiatives and finding that right balance.
And to the question of operationalizing this plan, how in depth do you go in setting plan objectives against employee performance, or setting it against a kind of maybe a I don't know, quarterly kind of a quarterly performance review. I mean, how do you keep track, even if it is a qualitative metric rather? How do you keep track of how you're actually moving down the field on the objectives?
So we use the strategic plan as the framework to help inform and shaping of our annual business plans. So, we'll through the kind of from August through October, we'll spend a lot of time looking at, okay, how are we able to grow and perform financially? How can we balance that with a few targeted strategic advancements at the company-wide level? And then we'll ask each region and office to identify, what strategic elements are they moving forward that kind of grow to the overall advancement of the company. And then we'll do a pretty thorough description of what each office, region, market, service lines strategies are. And then we'll do a detailed report mid-year and end of the year, kind of on a qualitative write-up of what they're advancing. And then kind of from the operational leaders of the company, we'll do a similar on the financial to make sure we're balancing, performance, so that at the end of the year we can reward our people, we can grow the kind of stock value of the company, and we have the right amount of money to invest in those strategic advancements. So we're kind of balancing those, but we talk about and celebrate the strategic advances mid-year and end of year. But to your point, the communication of them and the keeping them alive, and not just asking, okay, what's the financial performance of an office as the only question, but starting with, how are you raising your prominence? How are you strengthening those, advancements you've had? Okay, and what are the financial outcomes you're seeing, and how are you balancing those? Even the framing of that question, I think, is really important, so that all of your team members realize that they're both important elements. I think it's really easy to look at financial metrics and ask questions there, but I think that inhibits people from then, reminding themselves that they need to think strategically and balance that with financial performance. So the other thing that we do is all of my communications to the company are kind of organized around the major imperatives. So everything we celebrate, everything I talk about, every advancement we make, I kind of put it in the context of the strategic plan so that it stays alive and people understand, hey, that helped us move us closer to not just our strategic objectives, but our vision. So it's important to keep those things alive. Otherwise, you get about a year and a half in, and then that plan kind of sits on the shelf and everybody just goes back to the day-to-day activities.
Mm. So I think that's an important point to make, that having that mix of the not just the metrics that are numbers based, but then having a lot of metrics that are more strategic and just kind of wide ranging, and then holding people to not so much to account, but when it comes to really reviewing the process of the plan, it is that reminder to always think strategically. It's that you have this larger roadmap that you're trying to put into place, and it helps employees think outside the box, or maybe look at opportunities that might not immediately be there, or because you're looking at a number, but you might see something that could actually be a better opportunity because it fits in from the strategic perspective of the plan. And that's something really important to keep in mind for everybody out there listening and watching, that it is that constant conversation of, how are you moving the company forward? How are we actually broadening our scope or raising our prominence? Because in those kind of conversations, you might spark new ideas and new opportunities.
You also see sometimes that, an office or a team might get stuck. And as you're talking to them about, oh, you know what? Our office over in New York has kind of figured that out. Let me get you guys to talk to each other. Let me get you a little more help or resources where you're running into a challenge somewhere. Or, sometimes it's, just helping someone unblock a thought, but keeping that top of mind, and that's what you're talking about as you're talking to your office managers, your team leaders, reminds them that that's what's important, and that's why I'm asking about it too when I go around, because that's the important thing. If I go in and talk financial metrics, everybody kind of tightens up. If I go in and talk how are we doing strategically, how you doing advancing things, and how are you kind of balancing the financial operation from a responsible, that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it allows people to kind of lower their guard and enter into a more intensive conversation and feel more free to kind of spitball ideas than if it were just a look at the numbers and why doesn't A column match B column and the like.
And it's funny, it's created an opportunity for us here that, and this is interesting, that the outside facilitator that we're using, he's like, I'm kind of surprised your people really are looking forward to this. I'm like, yeah, this is what we do. This isn't a one time, oh, everybody drop everything we do strategic planning. Our people get excited about this because they see how we advance, and people get used to asking questions about strategy. Oh, Mike, have we thought of this yet? Have we thought of that? It makes all of us better, and it comes alive. And this outside facilitator says, this is really refreshing working with you guys. A lot of times people, well, I don't know, but we're talking about strategy all the time. We're, once a year we have a session with the board and the executive committee that we're trying to look at what are the issues beyond our 5-year horizon that we should be thinking about now. So you could go back a few years and we were exploring those kind of foresight ideas of what happens to the built environment when it's autonomous vehicles. Where is AI going? I mean, we were talking about that 4 or 5 years ago, preparing our minds so that we weren't surprised when something was, okay, now we can figure out how to bring this into our business and what we can do.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the point of having this be a you just don't do it once and put it on the shelf. You do it, to your point, every 5 years you have a kind of a new horizon that you're looking forward to, because after the third or so plan cycle, it starts getting really embedded in the company culture. And it creates this new generation of fresh ideas that come every 5 years. And it creates a culture that's a little bit more willing to take a chance, a little bit more willing to think out of the box or strategically in general, even if you're not in a planning cycle, because you're used to having that give and take, which really benefits everybody, especially if you have different offices and different departments talking to each other. It does change the way that people operate for the better, in my experience, and I'd say the same for yours. I do have to ask, Mike, because you're coming in as the new chair of the ACEC Research Institute. There's a lot happening at the Institute, and I'll make a plug here because we're going to be focusing in on the Institute on one of the sessions during the spring convention, which register now because we're getting close to the event next month. But we'll have a panel talking about all the stuff happening at the Institute. How are you going to bring your experience and your leadership style in the strategic planning to help really the Institute move to that next stage? Because it's in 3 years that it's been around, it's done so much, and it seems like it's primed to really turn into something special, even more so than it is.
Yeah, I feel like my, kind of what I've learned at VHB and what that the leaders of the company that I grew up under kind of challenged us from the strategic thought process have really helped me and prepared me, because the thing I get excited about the Research Institute, and the reason I was so willing and excited and appreciative of the opportunity to be part of it, was the Research Institute is trying to really look forward and be that leading source of knowledge and thought leadership for thinking about how do we create a more sustainable, safe, secure, technically advanced built environment, and that how can we as the Institute help all of our member firms ensure that we're ready for what we need to do to help society in 2030, 2035, and ACEC does a lot of, tactical work and a lot of kind of things around annual legislation and helping firms as they're getting up and growing. And we needed to, again, you need to invest at multiple horizons. So we're trying to think of those second and third horizons out and ask ourselves, what does the firm of the future, what are they going to be dealing with? What are going to be the challenges that society are confronted with in 2035? And you think of, okay, how's the workplace evolves in a very different way than historically has gone? That the role that technology is creating the opportunity to open up more types of analysis and decision making and design explorations. You look at what's going on with the changing nature, really of our climate. I mean, you're just seeing, the weather patterns changing. It's hotter than it's ever been in certain places, colder than it's ever been in certain places. The severity and the frequency of, major weather impacts and weather extreme events, all those things are happening. So how do we prepare our member firms? How do we get them thinking and provide them with thought pieces that allows them to shape their firm to be prepared for that type of future? I think we talk a lot in VHB and even at the Research Institute, our industry, has changed at a very methodical, slow pace. And that's been good for the way things changed. The changing nature of what's happening in society and the world is challenging our firms to think and adapt at a lot faster rate than we've ever had to as firms in the past. And our hope and our goal and our efforts are focused around the Research Institute providing those kind of exploratory research elements and then kind of helping create guidance for firms to think about how do they adapt more rapidly? What are the leaps, that might be beneficial over time to take about the type of firm that you build, what your ownership model will be, what other skill sets do we need into, our firms to really create thoughtful, holistic solutions, for a much more integrated, sustainable future than we've sometimes, have set the table for.
It's going to be a great panel at the convention. These are all big questions that are going to be tackled by the Institute with ACEC right behind you, because we're dealing with the same issues and from an advocacy or legislative side of the coin. But there's a lot to talk about. And Mike, I know we're up against it, so I want to say thank you again for joining us today to talk about strategic planning. There's so much that could be said about it. I think we're just scratching the surface, but it's the kind of thing that I'd love to talk to you about more, especially going into detail about some planning. But I really do appreciate the time you've taken today to join us today and talk about this.
Thanks, Jeff. We are, I really believe we're at the most exciting time in our industry's history. And I think this is the opportunity for, our member firms to have a bigger impact on helping create an even better built environment in society going forward. It's up to us to kind of take that charge and move it forward. And the Research Institute is looking forward to help spur that thought.
Couldn't say it better myself. And Mike, thanks again for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Take care. And again, this has been an episode of Engineering Influence, podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies, and we'll see you next time.